This is Just Listen, hosted by George. Today is March 17th, 2025. Welcome to the podcast. There has been a lot of talk about tariffs. So today I want to talk about the U.S. government federal policy on tariffs. And the question is, should voters give the Trump admin more time for the tariffs to achieve American policy? So we're talking about policy and the tariffs and the intent of the tariffs. So U.S. goods trade deficit with China in 2024 was $294.4 billion. And then with Canada is $63 billion. And then with Mexico, it's $171.8 billion. Now, this is the trade deficit with these three countries because these are the countries that are being looked at for these tariffs that the president is talking about. And there's been some misinformation on the mainstream networks. Like I always say, they're laser focused on why it can't work and tying it to the American voter saying, well, that's not what the guy promised. Okay, so the focal point will be on why Trump is actually doing the tariffs. So, and I had to go to various sources to find it. And to tell you the truth, it's always finding stuff, news, streaming information. You always see, well, they'll say it, and then right away they'll say why it can't be done. And I really think that that's counterproductive for the news agencies and magazines and all of that to do it that way. They should just be laying out the information. Okay, so Trump's tariffs, and this is the first one, Trump's tariffs on Canada and Mexico are meant to secure the borders. Now, the president did say that we are in a drug war, and our neighbors to the north have been abetting the transfer of fentanyl and undocumented immigrants into the United States. Now, they, meaning the mainstream media, would say, well, there's only been 60 pounds of fentanyl. Okay, well, any fentanyl that comes through is bad. But the focal point from this bullet is undocumented migrants. And I would tell you that up until the time that they started the tariffs, the Canadians were not keeping track of who was coming through the border. So this measure is supposed to get Canada and Mexico's attention. Now that's important later because I'm going to tell you what's happened. All right, second one. The tariffs are actually meant to force companies to relocate production to the United States. Now, if this is done, this would close the trade deficit. If companies, and this is what the president said, if companies move to the United States, there are no tariffs. This one is very important. As everybody knows, we don't build as much in the United States as we used to, and trade is good. It has to be balanced. And currently, as you're going to find out, it's not balanced whatsoever. Like I said earlier, if you look at trade deficit, we are bringing in more stuff than making money exporting. And that's what the real issue is. And the tariff, in the case for the trade deficit, equalizes it. Now, we also see that the tariffs are being used by the other team to threaten us as well. Now, this trade deficit and building America is important because we are trying to have more jobs for Americans and then therefore export more to bring more money into the country. So the tariffs is the equalization in this one to get the other country's attention and to make it fair. And the Trump administration said that when he was campaigning for president. Now, the next one is Trump's tariffs are meant to force Canada and Mexico to modestly revise the terms of their trade with the U.S. So, Canada is committing unfair trade practices against the United States. That's what the president said. Canada doesn't allow banks to do business in Canada, but their banks flood the American market. Now, I don't know if most of you even knew that one, that the banks can't do any business. American banks can't do any business in Canada. That is interesting. So we would have to peel that back and understand why we're not allowed to do that. Now, the tariff is getting their attention on this, and I think that is a good thing because in general, if we're looking at all of this, I've been doing the podcast almost 2 years now. When are we going to put these policies in place that benefit our country, and then the voters aren't paying so much in taxes? Now, the next one is tariffs are meant to raise revenue. The Trump administration has repeatedly suggested that it sees high tariffs as a means of raising revenue, thereby enabling U.S. to cut income tax rates. Wouldn't that be great? And the tariff is effectively a sales tax on foreign goods. Now, I have heard about this, but doesn't that make sense? That you want to raise revenue so that you can have all of these programs in the United States, and then the taxpayer is not paying dollars. Now, the tariffs are the attention getter. That's how we have to start looking at tariffs. Attention. Hey, we're trying to get your attention, and as I've stated in the previous ones, this is why we want to make it fair, because we're the ones, I would remind you, that are probably about $38 trillion in debt, and no one is close to our debt. I think the next country that has debt for the country is only like 80 billion. Okay. No other industrialized countries have the deficit like the United States has. So those are the reasons why the Trump administration are doing the tariffs. And as usual, you won't hear these on the mainstream media because, gosh, why would this guy make a point, or why are we radically doing different business to benefit our own country? So now getting back to fentanyl for a second. So in 2022 and 2023, the drug overdoses caused more than 111,000 fatalities per year, most of them driven by fentanyl and synthetic opioids. Now, most of us don't know anything about that. You would actually have to look that up. But you can remember in 2022 and 23, the news agencies were talking about it, but the government, the federal government, they said that they were stopping it. It was coming in through the borders. especially from Mexico. So Mexico has been the main source of fentanyl into the United States. Nearly 21,900 pounds that the U.S. law enforcement seized last year at the southern border, right? Okay, and like I stated earlier, for Canada, it was 43 pounds. However, I would note to you again that on immigration and drugs coming in, they weren't tracking it, so they really don't know. Now, Chinese companies, interestingly, are widely known to make precursor chemicals, many of which have legitimate reasons to produce controlled substances, principally in the medical sector. However, these precursors are often purchased by transnational criminal organizations in Mexico to synthesize the fentanyl, because apparently the United States is the main country, and since we had people coming into the country, there's a relationship between people coming in to the country and the flow of fentanyl in the country, and American lives are being lost. Now, the tariffs are the attention getter. Here's what the tariffs have done so far. Canada unveiled a $1.3 billion plan to secure the border and appointed a fentanyl czar. That was based on the tariffs. And as stated, you have to get Canada's attention, in this case, to get them to follow. Because think about it, immigration should be between the countries, not the people coming in, especially if they're coming through Canada or Mexico to get to the United States. They, in the past, did not have a vested interest. Now, Mexico announced it would immediately reinforce its border with another 10,000 National Guard troops aimed specifically at stopping fentanyl in its tracks. And also, I would add, they're going to stop people from coming across the border. The border should be an agreement between governments, and Mexico's should never have had the policy of, well, we don't care as long as you don't stay in our country. Okay, now, the country that really hasn't done anything is China. China has responded with countermeasures, including imposing new tariffs on U.S. exports and initiating regulatory probes into U.S. companies, while also emphasizing the importance of defending its rights and interests. Okay, so China is a wash at this point. However, let's see what the tariffs do, and then we can talk about it, report on it. And you have to understand, when you're making changes, and I don't want to use the word radical again, but changes, you have to change the way that we're doing business, because the policies that we have been using have not worked for immigration and drugs coming into the United States of America. And as a voter, we want some action. And the status quo that we've seen in the past just hasn't worked. We've tried the other ideas and they just don't work. And it seems like that the tariffs will get us fair trade, it'll make the borders better, and we can have actual revenue coming into the country that helps all Americans. This is Just Listen, hosted by George. Let me know what you think.